If you're just joining, this is the afternoon learning lab, organizational sustainability in the age of climate change. So I want to make sure you're in the right session. And we hope that everyone has been enjoying their day, whether you've been online or in person. I'm joining virtually, but I am over here at the Ronald Reagan Building in Washington, D.C., and it's been a really exciting day. One, as you probably all know and saw this morning in this morning's sessions, we have relaunched and we are now SID-US, not SID Washington. So we're very excited about that. And second, this is our first hybrid conference. So it's been crazy but amazing to see people joining us online, hundreds of people all around the world joining online, and then hundreds of people joining in person at Washington, D.C. So I am Julie Montgomery. I'm the VP of Membership and Partnerships at SID-US, and you are at the Learning Lab, Organizational Sustainability in the Age of Climate Change. We are so excited to have these great speakers, 3 speakers today, to share their experience working in their own organizations on really pushing the agenda of how to make the world a better place in regards to the environment and climate. We've got Carl Erdman, the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at AmeriCares. We've got David Geyer, who is the Senior Director of Global Communities. And we have Shen-Yin Zhu, the Global Sustainability Initiative Lead at World Resources Institute. I am not going to go into their bios. You have them all online because I know we have a full agenda today. So I'm going to turn it over to them, and they will probably talk for a few minutes, tell them about themselves. I would encourage you all to find out, let us know who's here today in the chat. Introduce yourself, your organization, and where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear who else is here. So if you could put that in the chat. We're going to have some polls today. We're going to have a presentation, and then we'll have time for questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the facilitators.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks for having us. Thanks to all the participants out there. My name is Shen-Yin. We're just going to introduce our organizations a little too for context as we talk about the sustainability initiatives at our various 3 organizations. I lead the Sustainability Initiative at World Resources Institute. We're a nonprofit research organization. We have offices in 14 different countries and about 1,600 staff working on research, data, all around the issues of sustainability, environmental impact, and development. For my role at the at WRI, I help apply all of our research data sets and work towards our internal operations, so helping the organization walk the talk.
Hi, I'm David Geyer. I'm a Senior Director at Global Communities. We're an NGO in Silver Spring, Maryland, and we work in the international development humanitarian response space. USAID is our largest client, and I'm also very involved as a member of the Green Team at Global Communities, and we'll be getting into the details of that as we go along.
And my name is Carl Erdman. I'm Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at AmeriCares. AmeriCares is a global health and disaster response organization headquartered in the US and with operations around the world. I'm also a member of our Sustainability Working Group, which is why I'm here today, and I'm glad to be with all of you. So as we mentioned, we're going to do a couple of polls throughout this presentation. If you're attending virtually, you can just use your laptop and go to www.menti.com right there and enter in the code that you see there, starting with the number 4. Or if you're in person, you can go on your cell phone and do the same thing. But basically, you can log into menti.com, you'll find the poll, and we just are asking participants to let us know where your organization is on your environmental sustainability journey. Are you at tier 1 where you haven't gotten started, or you're not sure where your organization is? Or are you at tier 5 where you have sustainability strategies and policies in place? Or is your organization somewhere in between? So please fill out the poll and let us know. we'll give it a minute or a couple seconds for folks to do that so we can see where everybody's at.
David, I'm actually not seeing the poll refresh, but on the web version, it is.
So, Chinyan, what should I do?
Why don't you go to maybe the link that I just put in chat? Everyone also can. It should show you the live results as they're coming out as well.
Okay, I'll let other people do that. I'm in presentation mode here.
Yeah. And for those that maybe can't see or access that link, looks like we have 6 people at tier 3 right in the middle. And then tier 1, 5, so no sustainability initiatives or don't know. Tier 2, 3 answers. And then all the way on the excellent side of the spectrum, 1 person responded to tier 4 and 2 at tier 5 with a structural sustainability program and policy.
Great. Okay. Should we move on?
Yep. All right, so we'll jump in and frame this discussion around sort of the biggest sustainability topic out there, which is the climate crisis. The image that you see here is adapted from a work by climate scientist Ed Hawkins called Warming Stripes. And it's meant to convey information in an intuitive way to non-scientists. What you see here is a number of vertical stripes, and each stripe represents the temperature of a single year starting in 1850, all the way on the left, and then moving stripe by stripe, year by year to the right. The stripe's color indicates the planet's mean surface temperature in that year. So the blue turquoisey kind of stripes are cooler years, the beige stripes are average years, and the orange and dark brown stripes are warmer years. And the figure makes clear that that the cooler years are in the past, and that the Earth is heating up and projected to heat up quite a bit. The figure also shows 2 diverging pathways, one that leads up and one leading down. Both show increasing global temperatures, with the upper pathway, which is the one that we're currently on, showing dramatically warmer temperatures than the lower one. And that's because we're sort of already locked into some degree of warming based on current greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels and also historical emissions. But the path that we take will be dramatically affected by actions that are taken today, and whether we end up on the upper or warmer path or the bottom slightly cooler path. So we're here today to talk about important forces in our society, and that's our organizations. We are organized into companies or NGOs that carry out a business function or an organizational mission. And what David, Shengyun, and I want to share with you all is some of our experiences connecting our organizations to the climate crisis, as well as some of the sustainability initiatives that our organizations have taken on.
Thank you, Carl. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Ways, if you're like closer to tier 1, you know, just getting started, or don't know if you've done anything, you know, ways to marshal support for organizational change and action, and then some of the initiatives you can take at your organizations to advance a program of sustainability, and then a few closing remarks and Q&A at the end of the presentation. So, you know, for marshaling support, gauging green interest among staff can be very important in determining whether your organization is ready for change. And once you're ready, recruiting a champion to facilitate change and help lead the charge can be important as well. At Global Communities, a survey in 2016 unexpectedly revealed strong staff concern about climate change. And this really created an opportunity, an opening to start talking about sustainability. So another way to marshal support is develop a green team. And the pandemic put many things on hold, including Global Communities Green Team. But now that we're back in the office, plans include reaching out to our offices in more than 30 countries to determine which programs, which offices have the interest and capacity to undertake their own sustainability efforts. So that's our plan.
And similarly at AmeriCares, we started a sustainability working group a couple of years ago, comprised of staff from all different departments and from both our headquarters and country teams. The group is tasked with undertaking sustainability initiatives from both like an operational perspective, that is trying to reduce our organizational ecological footprint, but also in programming through climate adaptation and mitigation measures.
And I'll just add that our Sustainability Champions group is about 70. I spend quite a bit of time maintaining recruitment and ensuring that we have a champion from every office, department, program, area. But they perform an essential role in addition to providing support for the sustainability team. They help share out updates to what we're doing and get their team members and offices on board to various projects. And they also give us really great insight on implementation on the ground in different regions.
So networking with like-minded organizations and individuals is, another way to kind of marshal support, and it can bring, lots of benefits, new perspectives, shared knowledge and experience, and increased visibility for your organization potentially. Global Communities, WRI, AmeriCares are great places to start networking. And here's another place to get started or continue with sustainability.
As David noted, Carl, David and I met via the Sustainability Managers Roundtable, SMRT, and it's simply an informal group of sustainability leaders. Some of us have formal sustainability roles, others lead green teams, task force, and voluntary efforts, but we meet monthly online to share knowledge, and in the last 2 years, we've already started to collaborate on different projects, publications, and data projects together.
So marshaling financial resources is another way to get started. Not really much needed, really just staff time and commitment to get started. But as the sustainability program develops, financial resources might be needed to engage speakers, to purchase food for green events, or to purchase green swag. At Global Communities, our CFO allocates an annual amount from the G&A pool for such expenses. Staff time, including green team staff time spent on initiatives, is also a G&A expense.
And for WRI, we've had an internal carbon price since 2012 of $50 per metric ton on some of our largest GHG emitting activities. And that's allowed us to have a more secure annual budget for our internal sustainability program expenses.
So the next topic is sustainability initiatives, and this is the largest part of the presentation today.
But looks like some folks have been able to take the poll. We're going to take another poll here to ask participants which of the following 6 topics are most relevant to your organization, and you can select up to 2. So feel free to go back to the menti.com and you should see the poll here, and you can select your topic areas.
Xingyan, how does this compare to the offline compilation of votes?
It looks like it's updating properly.
Good.
Oh, no, it seems to just update once for some reason. More are coming in. We now have 12 responses. It looks like a 3-way tie for sustainability mainstreaming, environmentally preferred purchasing, and humanitarian development and programming. Environmentally preferred purchasing and humanitarian development and programming are now in the lead. So it seems like a pretty diverse range of interests. We could probably get started.
Okay. So of the sustainability initiatives, we have 6 categories, as you can see here. As we move through all the different initiatives, you can keep track where you are by the bottom, following the bottom, the bar at the bottom of the slide. So let's start with sustainability mainstreaming. And an important first step in establishing a sustainability program is to develop environmental policies and guidelines, which can set boundaries for acceptable and unacceptable behavior in the workplace. It's been our experience at Global Communities that if you have a policy or a rule, let's call that a stick, as a justification for a course of action, most staff are going to follow it. Green Business Certification provides a useful framework for building sustainable workplace practices. Montgomery County, where Global Communities is located, has a very strong Green Business Certification program. Maryland, in fact, is now rolling out that program across the state. And other states and private sector entities have Green Business Certification programs as well. So awareness raising is a requirement of Global Communities Green Business Certification, and it includes brown bags, Earth Day celebrations, and much more.
And also, AmeriCares, we do a lot of sustainability awareness raising among our staff, not only to make sure that staff are aware of our sustainability initiative and to get volunteers to join our working group, but also to share information just about climate change in general, and especially its effects on human health and natural disasters, and also to discuss our organization's own carbon footprint and ways that we may be able to reduce it.
And to add to that, WRI has been working with HR in addition to events and brown bags. We're able to insert sustainability into a lot of the career pipeline processes. So during hiring, we may ask questions about how staff align their lifestyle with the mission of WRI. During onboarding on the first day, we offer a sustainability session to give an overview of our different initiatives and actions. And then even in performance reviews, we talk about what sustainability goals staff might want to add for the next year.
So next set of sustainability initiatives, GHG measuring and reporting. In 2019, total greenhouse gas emissions from all human activities were estimated to be around 43 gigatons, and that's a 90% increase since 1970. Climate science conclusively links the rise in emissions to the rise in global temperatures. And there is at least one very important reason for an organization to measure its emissions, to establish a baseline against which to compare and set reduction targets in the future.
So greenhouse gas emissions occur through a number of activities. Probably the most tangible that we can think of is electricity that we use in our offices, for example, especially if that electricity is produced from burning fossil fuels. Other things like the traveling to and from office by car or whatever mode of transportation we use. At AmeriCares, one of our biggest sources of carbon emissions is our supply chain. We ship medical aid and other disaster relief items around the world. We do so by air, by sea, and by surface transportation as well. So by taking the quantity of cargo that's shipped, and comparing that to the type of transportation that it uses, we can calculate just how much carbon emissions account for that activity.
For WRI, we're one of the co-authors of the GHG protocol. So in the early 2000s, we actually started to do our own operational emissions inventory. And we've been growing the scope and the boundary of that inventory over time. From 2010 to 2020, we set ourselves science-based targets for reductions. And we were looking at 50% emissions reduction in electricity and 20% for our largest scope 3 activities. In 2020, we achieved 2 out of 3 of those targets. We did achieve electricity emissions reduction before the pandemic. And then we also saw 20% or more reduction due to the pandemic travel bans. Moving forward, we've reset new targets for 2030 with a higher level of ambition, looking for near 50% emissions reduction for all of our scopes, covering about 96% of our entire footprint. And we also updated our base year to 2019 to reflect the addition of many offices. When we first started doing this, we were a single office in the US, and we've now grown to at least 14 offices globally. And collecting all of that data for 2019, we're able to then say this is our new base year, and we're now looking for almost 50% reduction at an absolute level across the board.
So now let's move on to waste reduction and recycling. It's not only rising temperatures that threaten our future, resource depletion does as well. Sustainable as opposed to throwaway practices will help ensure future generations can also meet their resource needs.
For an environmental organization, one of the first challenges related to waste for WRI was actually recycling contamination, or wish cycling. So our initial efforts back in 2016, before we can even set a zero waste target or begin composting, was to focus on getting people to recycle correctly, and in particular, avoiding putting in contaminants into our recycling bin. The next step after that, once we were able to prove that we could recycle properly, we were able to enact one of our green lease clauses with our landlord and start compost collection. And the image on the right actually shows our waste audits that we've continued pre-pandemic levles. So we're able to track about 70 to 80% diversion to recycling and compost. And that red line shows the drop in contamination since we've started our program.
Locally in the DC metro area, there are several different commercial compost companies. Global Communities and WRI both use veteran compost, and prices are reasonable. Before the shutdown, Global Communities, we estimated, was diverting around 75 pounds of compostable material from the landfill every week at a cost of only $80 a month. Plastic-free workplace. In 2019, Global Communities introduced a plastic-free policy, which included elimination of single-use plastic silverware and water bottles. And of course, this policy was designed to support efforts to keep plastic out of human and animal food chains and out of our oceans. But I have to tell you that not everyone, not every staff member applauded this policy when we rolled it out.
For our plastics-free approach, we followed along with many global organizations on a Plastic-Free July campaign, the goal of which was to avoid single-use plastics during the month of July, with the hope that it would be a habit that people would maintain through the rest of the year, and in particular, rethinking source waste, so choosing different products at the beginning to avoid the waste at the end.
So a big category of activity for many organizations is purchasing goods and services, but can it be done in an environmentally preferable way?
This is actually one of the largest GHG emissions categories for WRI, all of the goods, services, and partners in our value chain. And to sort of support that in a streamlined way, we rely a lot on third-party certifications. Because of the wide range of vendors, goods, and services that we do contract every year, we can't possibly vet every single product for the range of environmental and social criteria we're looking for. So a lot of third-party certifications by the product type or the sector can support this. So for paper, we're looking for particular FSC and ancient forest certifications. For laptops, we use EPEAT. Cleaning products, which has been a huge discussion during the last 2 years. There are safe and environmentally preferred disinfectants out there. And for food, Cool Foods helps us guide vegetarian, vegan foods for our events and meetings. And even something as large as buildings, we're using certifications, not just for our own renovations of interior offices. We lease all our spaces, but when we start to look for a new office lease, finding buildings, landlords, and management companies that also use these certifications then supports your other initiatives down the line.
Sustainable procurement is the act of purchasing a good or a service based on more than just the usual factors, such as price or delivery schedule. This may include taking into account environmental, diversity, or health impacts of a particular purchase. This may also include setting requirements to meet the certifications, such as those Shengyan just talked about in the previous slide. Such considerations can then be introduced into both solicitation documents and into contract or lease terms and conditions.
This isn't quite procurement, but another way of aligning money with values on sustainability is through sustainable investing. In 2016, WRI signed on to the UN Principles of Responsible Investment, and we've been on a multi-year journey of screening for ESG factors for our endowment, looking at environmental, social, and governance criteria, and then shifting towards assets that line up with those values. The image on the right shows a few snapshots of our endowment portfolio over time through this journey. It does take a bit of effort and work to find enough assets to invest in and define very clearly what your goals are. One of the other things we wanted to do at the end of 2020 was to see what has been the GHG emissions impact of our ESG journey and our net zero commitments on our investments. The graphic shows over time from 2010 to 2020 our total GHG footprint, but in 2019 and the last two data points, it shows the addition of investment emissions to our footprint. So the first thing to notice is that investment emissions are quite huge for WRI. It became the second largest category of emissions for our scope 3 in 2020. The other thing to notice, though, is in 2019 to 2020, we did a portfolio rebalance of about 15% of our funds, a big divestment push that got us to that 85% ESG screened level. And we saw in the numbers that from 2019 to 2020, our emissions for that category of investments went down by 35% at an absolute level. So it is exciting to see that potential that the ESG screening process is working, but it also is pointing to the need to track these emissions because it is quite material for an organization like WRI that doesn't even have a very large endowment.
Yeah, and related to investing, this was actually based on an employee demand, but we at AmeriCares asked our 401k provider to make it possible for staff to invest in ESG funds in their retirement accounts, so that employees could sort of align their investment strategies with their own personal values. This was actually a really easy thing to do, to ask our 401k provider to do this, and it's really kind of a low-hanging fruit out there in terms of all of the other sustainability initiatives that we've been discussing.
So on to travel, transportation and travel. By one estimate, air travel contributes to 3% of the United States total CO2 emissions. By another estimate, assuming travel returns to business as usual after the pandemic, the number of air trips and related CO2 emissions are projected to triple by 2050.
For travel, it's been another different journey for WRI. Pre-pandemic, it was one of our trickiest emissions categories to move. And, like many organizations here, we're global. We have travel as part of our outcomes and relationship building, fundraising, data collection. So we started with a very simple step of introducing preferred reduced emissions travel. So direct flights and rail, for example, sometimes cost more, but we embedded in the policy that even if they cost more, it is more environmentally responsible to choose those. And so trying to push people towards those options. And then encouraging optimization by doing multi-city trips or fewer staff being sent to a single event, using regional staff or partners instead. But during the pandemic, we worked with fellow fellow SMRT members, about 8 organizations, use the same survey template. And we learned that there's been a lot of shifting attitudes about travel in our NGO organizations, at least. In particular, 2 highlights were that social norms are really important, particularly leadership signaling of support for travel reductions or strategic travel conversations. In the survey, it showed much higher potential reduction levels from staff if they felt supervisor and peer support on it. And then the next image on the right shows that more staff now believe that travel reductions are possible than before the pandemic.
Oh, was this when you talked to Xingyan or?
Oh, I just mentioned it already.
Okay, sorry about that. A little bit
It's okay.
slow. A little bit slow. So Global Communities does a lot of international travel. It aligns with our mission and with many of our work objectives. And it's a pretty hard sell at Global Communities to say, hey, we're going to reduce our international travel. So maybe we went in a different direction. In January 2020, we took a step towards reducing the impact of air travel by establishing a modest carbon offset program. So travelers can donate up to 10% of their per diem for each trip, and then Global Communities matches that with an amount from unrestricted. And then we make a very careful and judicious choice where to invest that money into carbon offsets.
And another topic related to travel, but more in town, is commute. And now with the pandemic, working from home. Those 2 impacts together are part of Scope 3 Category 7 if you are doing GHG inventories. For WRI, we've been tracking commute using a pattern-based approach, so asking people what mix of modes do they use to get into work, and are there different patterns that they use during the week. In general, the data helps us steer very specific programs encouraging sustainable commute, so we were not necessarily advocating for more transit, as we already had quite a large portion of staff adopting it. Instead, we were focusing on carpool benefits and encouraging biking and walking and active commuting. During the pandemic, though, we started to do a different survey, one about working from home, what equipment, heating and cooling, what regions were they using electricity in. And using that data, we were able to see a little bit more about the impacts of working from home. And in general, across all of our different global offices, heating and cooling, depending on the climate that you're in, were much larger percentages of energy use while working from home than the equipment itself, like the laptops, monitors, and printers, which were very few. And so that points to a slightly different strategy as you move forward in thinking about a flexible workplace. So if staff are going in half the time to your commercial office space, working from home half the time, and also commuting, it opens up a lot more potential emissions. And really optimizing all 3 activities will be something to think about as we figure out what kind of mixes we have of each. David, I think you're actually going backwards. There's one more image of a map that's coming up.
That one?
One more.
Sorry, my bad.
And one of the other things it points to is the potential for more renewable energy purchasing, even thinking about it for home work places. This map shows a strategy that we're working on around renewable energy certificate purchasing and prioritizing certain areas that have higher emissions per kilowatt hour of energy produced. And really phasing it in based on that. And it could be renewable energy certificates, but it could also be on-site solar, community solar. Each region varies a lot on what's available and what's allowed in their grid.
So up to this point, we've been talking about sustainability initiatives that go to internal operations, those applicable to headquarters or office operations in other locations. Here we take a quick look at programming at the humanitarian development work that organizations like AmeriCares and Global Communities do in communities all over the world.
Right. So as I mentioned earlier, AmeriCares is a global health and a disaster response organization. And one of the things that really resonated with our leadership and our staff generally was connecting the climate crisis to the resulting health crises. You know, with increased heat waves, vector-borne illnesses, and population displacement. These are all issues that public health officials and healthcare providers, and of course patients and communities themselves, are going to be dealing with. So we looked across each of our AmeriCares 4 programmatic areas, and they're up here listed. You have access to medicine, clinical services, emergency programs, and community health programs, and looking at how each area could support climate adaptation and mitigation efforts. And climate programming is now sort of a cross-sectional element in each of our technical areas. And this climate programming has become probably our most important sustainability initiative to date.
Here are a few programming considerations from global communities perspective. First, we found that communities don't need to be convinced that climate change is a threat. They are on the front line and often have very appropriate ideas, if not the resources, for climate adaptation and mitigation. And although Global Communities is not an environmental organization, we view climate programming as a burgeoning opportunity to meet our mission. Recent and ongoing programming includes regenerative agriculture in Ethiopia, reforestation and erosion control in Haiti, and climate change adaptation planning and disaster risk reduction in Colombia.
All right, so that wraps up our section on sustainability initiatives. And now that you've heard about each one of those initiatives, we'd like to hear from you all what you'd like to work on first moving forward at your organization. So once again, you can go to menti.com and click on the link and select which area or topic you'll work on first.
Carl, if I can just jump in here, and it's not only work on first, maybe work on next, because that one vote for GHG measuring, that I put that in there. You know, we've already advanced our sustainability program a ways, so this is what we're hoping to work on next, is the GHG measuring and reporting. And Shingyin, you might need to call it out how people are voting.
Yes, it looks like a lot on GHG measuring and reporting, yay. Equal a little bit ahead on environmentally preferred purchasing as second, sustainability mainstream, transportation and travel, and humanitarian development programming, all tied for third right now. And Julie mentioned that there's some questions in the chat. If we are ready, perhaps we could skip to those and close out if we have time with our statements.
Yeah, I think if we move on, we'll be okay. So shall we move on from this poll?
Yeah, maybe we can get to some of the questions.
Okay. So now on to closing remarks and Q&A. I'll do the first remark. And let me start by saying that setting up and advancing a program of organizational sustainability is not without challenges. In my experience, staff apathy and indifference to sustainability ranks as a high challenge. At times at Global Communities, as we launched our Green Business Certification Program, staff apathy crossed over into staff annoyance and worse. I mentioned not everyone applauded our plastic-free policy when we rolled it out. Some of the lessons we learned through all of that were the following. Don't call people out for their indifference or their non-compliance with the sustainability program. This will likely only engender more indifference or more annoyance with what you are trying to accomplish. And another thought, always contextualize the sustainability work. If organizational policy is the stick, as I noted earlier, then contextualized messaging can be the carrot. If it is clear, solution-oriented, and answers the fundamental question, why all of this matters. Xingyan, over to you.
Yes, I had a lot of back and forth on what I would say in closing, but I think given the poll results of the third question, I will stick with my one suggestion of data being center of everything. For WRI, we started with this as the GHG inventory as part of our concept and way to demonstrate feasibility as we approached other companies to adopt the GHG protocol. But now, we've learned that it has so many different functions. It helps with our staff engagement. When we parse out the data by activity and at a smaller scale, we can show even staff impact on waste. For example, at our quarterly waste audits, we're able to share almost immediate feedback with the participants of the audit. But then even at a broader level, at a strategic level, our annual data and our reporting on our website helps get leadership support. We're constantly reporting this information to our executive team and using that as the case for why we need more, both symbolic support, funding support, and overall just growth of the program as the organization grows. And it even serves a very important external purpose to our donors, our funders. There was a question earlier about greenwashing and ESG, but I think in general, if you have that GHG data backing, you have that evidence that it is what you are doing is of a certain quality and level that's measured and tracked for your outcomes. There's always criticism about greenwashing, and it is true in some cases, but I think having that data helps keep everyone on the same target and accountable as well to the results.
Thanks, Xingyan. Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up here. We have this slide up, this climate justice rally, and the concept of climate justice is a recognition that climate change will cause the most harm to those who have been least responsible for the crisis in the first place. And so I just want to circle back to the title of this presentation, which is Organizational Sustainability in the Age of Climate Change, with an emphasis on that word organizational, because really when it comes to taking action on an issue, especially an issue as big as climate change or other social injustices, organizing is really important because organizations have a lot more reach and influence than we individuals do. So I think it's important for those of us who do care about these issues to get our organizations behind us to take action. And from David's and Xingyan's and my perspectives, our organizations generally do to one degree or another. So I hope we've shared some useful knowledge and experiences for you all. And we'd love to hear about you later on, about your own organizations as you get started on or keep going on your sustainability journeys. Thank you. I think we'll take some questions now. Julie, do you maybe want to moderate the questions?
Yeah, sure. I'll read some that have come in. Okay, the first question comes from Tatiana from Counterpart International in El Salvador. And she wonders, she'd like to hear some examples of how sustainability is reflected in performance reviews.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share a little bit. We've gone through a couple of different performance review systems too, so we have a couple of different examples. Our first iteration was a very simple open-ended question in the annual performance review of how a staff person walks the talk on WRI's mission. And they were then supposed to enter in examples of either bike commuting, vegetarian foods. We offered a few trainings to suggest potential responses for staff. We got feedback that was a little too unstructured. So one iteration too, we actually had a very specific questionnaire that staff filled out as part of their competency review. And since then, we've moved to slightly different quarterly systems that are meant to be more fluid and conversational. And so now we ask staff as part of their long-term priorities, which is part of this new system, to list out one or two broader sustainability goals. And that could be being involved in your green team, for example, helping support data collection, or running their own campaign around one of our sustainability topics.
Great. Okay. So next question, it's actually two from Jane Knott at EDF. So is the purchase of emissions offsets part of your sustainability programs? And then second, any concern about the furor over ESG greenwashing?
Well, could you repeat the question on the offsets?
Yeah, hold on, let me get back to it. Is the purchase of emissions offsets part of your sustainability programs?
Yes, at Global Communities, that is part of our program. But I must say, we started the program in January 2020. And then, as we all know, March 2020, everything shut down, including all international air travel. And we're really not back 100% to the travel we were doing, the work we were doing internationally, as of today. So, we had to restart the green team. Now we'll have to restart a lot of different things, including our carbon offset program. But we've learned a lot in the ensuing couple of years. I think we're smarter about carbon offsets, and as I said, you really got to be careful and judicious about where you invest that kind of money to make sure you're getting a long-term return on it. And Carl, I think you could talk about the ESG greenwashing.
Well, I may have to punt this to Shengyan because she had a better answer than I did. But we were just talking about this as we were preparing this presentation the other day. Is ESG investing a real thing, or is it just greenwashing? And I think greenwashing is certainly a concern. I think what we have to kind of work with what we have, though, and if we're investing in 401k accounts and there's a way to try to ensure that those investments are doing better things for the environment and other issues, we should use the tools that are available to us. I don't know, Shengyin, if you want to add anything to it.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of furor over it. And in the past, there have been discussions too about greenwashing and the term sustainability or other types of it. But really, it comes down to the backing that you put behind your ESG strategy. It's one tool. All it stands for is environmental, social, and governance screening and metrics. It really is up to the organization to then determine the strategy for your investments. One of the starting points after we were signed on to the UNPRI was to create a climate change investment statement that lays out our goals and our targets. And then from there, that data backing. So really, there's always going to be fear, and it's a useful type of accountability for people to question the greenwashing. But having that backing of a strong program, strong criteria, and then the data to go with it is really the way to counteract that.
Okay, great. Sorry. Okay, this is kind of the next set of questions is from Anna Pollock, and one is kind of related to the offsets questions and that you had answered, David. She'd like to hear about the criteria used to choose offset investments by each organization. And then she'd also love to hear how you're tracking remote employee emissions, if you are, as a part of Scope 3 emissions.
Yeah, well, I just say quickly on the requirements for the offset emissions, we really haven't got that far yet because, like I said, everything closed down in March 2020, and we still are waiting to make our first offset purchase, and I guess it might never happen. To be honest, we had a program, we had a goal of doing all this, but then the pandemic hit, and now we're rethinking a lot of things. But we'll see what happens with that one.
And I can add, this is a conversation that SMRT constantly has. So if you are interested in joining some of those, reach out to David, Carl, and I. WRI doesn't currently purchase offsets. We used to, and when we did, we had specific criteria for retiring the credits, looking for certain gold standard or Vera certified ones. But now we're talking about moving forward again with them, but not as a strategy to net out or net zero our emissions. It would always be in addition to. And we're looking at the way Gold Standard and WWF put out this nice blueprint document discussing high quality carbon offsets in what's called a climate contribution model. And so if you have a certain amount of emissions, it's still considered important to do offsets, not to net at zero, but to still support the scaling of a lot of these projects that are out there. And I think there's other resources too, besides Gold Standard, WWF's blueprint for climate contribution approach. I thought I saw the first offset questions asked by somebody from EDF. They have this great carbon credit quality work that they're doing. And I think there's an ongoing conversation of how to assess the quality and the purpose of the offsets that you're using. And it may be a little bit organization specific, but there's also a lot of resources that are growing out there. Oh, and the telework piece. The working from home or remote work piece. We do have, we've worked with a couple of consulting organizations that have a range of options, from just using staff count and the region that they live in to a very robust survey. There are options for tracking employee emissions, and it is part of Scope 3, Category 7. I probably shouldn't get into the details of that today, given the lack of time.
Okay, we did have a couple more questions, but I think what I'll do is I'll send them to you all afterwards, if that's okay, because I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And I know we do have another session coming up. I do want to thank everyone for being here. Please, everyone, give a round of applause for our speakers today. Let me start my video. I realized I didn't have my video on. And for the participants, thank you so much for being here. We hope that you have enjoyed this, the Learning Lab. We encourage you to go to the next sessions. I am going to put the link for our survey. Please take a moment at the end of the day to fill out our survey. Your feedback is so important, especially as we had said at the beginning, this is our first hybrid conference, so we really want to know how we can improve this. But thank you all for being here. David, Shenying, and Carl, thank you. It's impressive the work that you do. It's hard work, and thank you to everyone for joining.
And please, everyone, reach out if you have any questions on how to get started or how to, advance what you've already started. So that's we're here to contribute in any way we can.
Thank you. I'll put your emails in if you're good with that. I'll put some of the information on the Tech Change platform so people can learn more about I'll put up the slides and a few other resources. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you all, and you all have a great afternoon, and I'll see some of you online and in person for the rest of the day. Thanks.
Julie, thanks everyone.
Bye.